Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If you want to improve your playing, join me and thousands of other pickers getting better every day at pegheadnation.com. Hi, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. Hey everybody, welcome back to Bluegrass Jam Along. This is your Bluegrass Briefing for December 9th, 2024. And it's the first one there's been for a couple of weeks. I've missed a couple, I'm sorry about that. Life has got busy. Good stuff, fun stuff, but just busy stuff. So we're having a little bit of a bumper roundup of stuff now. In this week's Bluegrass Briefing, just to catch you up on some bits and pieces that have been going on. And first of all, as always, I will just give you a quick recap of what's been going on Bluegrass Jam Along, because despite the fact we haven't had some Bluegrass Briefings, there's been lots of really fun content going on. If you missed it, I had a great chat with Charlotte Karivic about her new record, Sensible or Otherwise. Really, really cool guitar player and a great set of original tunes on that one. Really enjoyed that record, really enjoyed that interview. Check it out if you missed it. And then last week I put out a episode with Daryl Anger from the band Mr. Sun about their record Mr. Sun Plays Duke Ellington's Nutcracker, which is a wonderful reimagining of Duke Ellington's reimagining of Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite. Really fun record, really cool tunes, great band, really interesting process. Just a fascinating conversation. I think Daryl is so incredibly interesting. Such a kind of rich thread of Daryl Anger running through the last 50 years of string band music. And if, like me, you are a fan of instrumental string band music, you will be a fan of Daryl. And so that was just a great chat to get to have. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed talking to Daryl. And yeah, coming up this week, I have a conversation with Dan Gutstein about his book, Poor Gal, which is like a cultural history of the song Little Liza Jane and variations thereof. And it was just really interesting. I'm a big fan of seeing history through the lens of a particular thing, rather than sort of starting with big spreads of dates and kings and queens and battles and all of that kind of thing, starting with something smaller and then working your way out and working your way back. And this book does that beautifully. Follows a song, a family of songs, through sort of the last couple of 100 years of American history, and just, yeah, a cool chat. I really enjoyed it. Do have a listen. It's coming out on Wednesday. It's really fun pulling on some of these threads and seeing where they go. I think that's one of the joys of this podcast for me, is just something leads to something else, Christina Gaddy, who I had on talking about her book, Well of Souls, all about the banjo, recommended Dan to me and introduced us and said, I think you should have a chat. And that ended up being a really, really fun episode. So that's out on Wednesday. What else? That is basically it in terms of content. There's some more stuff coming up. There's another couple of bits before Christmas, but we're pretty much at the end of the year now. Already got some good stuff lined up for the beginning of next year. Some really interesting episodes to come. So do stick around. Thanks for listening through this year. It's been good having you here. And stick with it. On a personal level, I bought a banjo this week. I tried 5-string banjo once about 30 years ago, and I was horrendously bad at it. It just did not make sense in my brain. And I sold it and just ignored that and put it back in the box, and that was gone. And then recently I've had a real craving to play clawhammer banjo. So I sold a guitar and I bought a banjo, an open back banjo. And I've had it about 4 days and I still sound bad. But I'm going to start learning properly. I've been using the Peghead Nation course that Evie Layden does, clawhammer banjo, which is great. If you want to check it out, you can use the Jamalong code and get a free month of that, or any course actually, thanks to Peghead Nation. But yeah, so I'll let you know how we're going with that. I've been listening to a lot of clawhammer banjo recently. I'll tell you a bit more about that later on. But just, yeah, fun new adventure for me. So I look forward to it. If you've got any tips, if you've got any things you think I should listen to, send them my way. But yeah, that's my journey at the moment, is a bit of banjo. Wanted to say hi to Jeff Long, who emailed in to say how much he'd enjoyed a couple of the recent interviews. Thanks, Jeff. I was saying to him when I replied, it's such a funny thing, podcasting. I sit here and I put these episodes out, and I know how many people download them, and I know how many people listen to them. but I rarely actually hear from people, and so it was really nice to get a message just to say that they'd enjoyed those episodes. That was really cool. But that is it for podcast news. Let us move on to news and announcements, which is the section, as you know by now, we call Church Street News. And your first bit of news, Alison Krauss and Union Station. Now, the big news is that Russell Moore of Third Time Out is going to take over on guitar and vocals in Union Station with Alison. They've got a record recorded, which is coming out in March, and then another one that's due later. But they've announced an extensive tour, like 75 or so dates booked, starting in April, running all the way through till September. May well be some more on the way as well. The Arcadia tour. Band's first tour for a while, but yeah, Russell Moore, he's still staying in Third Time Out. That is still going to be a thing. Like most of Alison Krauss's band, they have other things going on at the same time, as does she. But yeah, so an album and a extensive North American tour. Hopefully there'll be some European dates at some point as well. But yeah, so Russell Moore has joined Alison Krauss and Union Station. Jerry did talk to me about that back when I chatted to him about the set back in the autumn, but it wasn't news that was there to be shared at that point. So I have known about that for a little while, but that's the big news in the world of Alison Krauss. So yeah, go and have a look. Go and check out Alison's website for all the tour dates and grab your tickets. That's really exciting. Noam Pekelny is hitting the road with Noam Pekelny and Friends, a new lineup of people hitting the road for a few dates in spring, featuring Jake Eddy on guitar, Dan Klingsberg on bass, Julian Pinelli on fiddle, and Theo Quayle on mandolin. Go and check those out. I'll stick a link in the show notes to where those dates are. A couple of things Earl Scruggs related. Earl Scruggs Centre is putting a couple of things on in February and March. In February, there's an event called Remembering Earl featuring Del McCory Band, Rob Ikes and Trey Hensley, and yeah, lots of great bluegrass to honour Earl's contribution to the music. And then in March, there's the Earl Experience Banjo Camp, which is Tony Trishka, Kristen Scott Benson and Bill Evans, described as an immersive hands-on experience for banjo enthusiasts. So I will stick a link in the show notes to that to go and check out those Earl Scruggs related events. Another banjo thing, actually, is the Baylor Fleck Blue Ridge Banjo Camp, which is happening in August next year. And the lineup for that is Tony Trishka, Kristen Scott Benson, Adam Larrabee, Greg List, and Mark Schatz. And yeah, sounds pretty cool. And the final thing, I mentioned this a little while ago, is the European Bluegrass Summit, which is a sort of joint venture between the European Bluegrass Music Association and IBMA. It's happening in Prague, and it's February 28th to March the 2nd, and it's going to be bluegrass professionals, musicians, enthusiasts all coming together for discussions, performances and networking, and so that is a really cool thing. Check that out as well. But that is it for your news and announcements. Lots of banjo stuff there, actually. So you've got the Noam Pekelny and Friends gigs, the Earl Scruggs stuff and Baylor's camp, also the European Bluegrass Summit in Prague, and Alison Krauss tour and record, and a new member of the group. Lots and lots going on. Let's move on and talk about some new releases in The Grass is New, because there's a lot going on there too. And I think all the music coming up and coming out in The Grass is New features people who've been on the podcast, which may be a first, I don't know. But it's very cool and just shows what a glorious time I've been having putting this together. The first thing is that Sarah Jarosa's Blue Heron Suite is back out on CD and vinyl. And if you've been listening, you'll know that I interviewed her about that just a couple of weeks ago, about the making of that record. If you missed it, go and listen. It was a really, really cool conversation. Sarah is fascinating and I love that record. So that was a proper treat for me, that one. Also recent guest on the podcast, Sierra Hull. She has her first 7-inch vinyl out, which is Holiday Favourites Volume 1. With the track First Snowfall that was out a couple of weeks ago, and Country Christmas has been added to that as well. So yeah, you can get that and Sierra's store on her website. I will put a link in. But yeah, Sierra Hull's Holiday Favourites Volume 1 is out. New band called High Horse that I mentioned in the briefing a few weeks ago when their single was out. Their album is now out as well. And it's really interesting stuff. I'm still sort of digging in, so yeah, looking forward to getting to know that one better, but it's definitely got my ear. And the link on there is it is produced by Jacob Jolliffe, who's been on the podcast, and engineered by Dave Cinco, who's been a guest as well. So yeah, High Horse, go and check that record out. There's something in the playlist, go and have a listen. Moving on, new single from Alison Brown, Steve Martin and Vince Gill called Wall Guitar. And Alison Brown was on the podcast earlier this year when we celebrated Earl Scruggs' 100th birthday. So yeah, check that out. Alison Brown, Steve Martin and Vince Gill with Wall Guitar. And then Tristan Scroggins, who's been on the podcast a couple of times. Scroggins and Rose have a new single out called Pandemic Buddy, which is in the playlist. Go and have a listen. And also they've got a new album due, which I think is coming in January, but I'm not entirely sure. But there's one on the way pretty soon. So yes, Scroggins and Rose, Pandemic Buddy. And then finally, Caitlin Canty, who you will remember came on the podcast to chat about her album Quiet Flame, which I adore. She has a new EP out called Come By The Highway Home, which features some live versions of those with the band that were on the record, which is Chris Eldridge, Brittany Haas, Sarah Jarosz and Paul Coet. What a lovely sound that is. And I think this is basically the stuff that was put together. They filmed some videos for these songs, sort of pretty intimate acoustic live performances, and the EP comes from those, and they're great. They're just really, really cool. I love those songs. I love that record, and it's really nice hearing these versions too. So that is your new releases for this week. The new old release of Blue Heron Suite, Sarah Jarosz's Blue Heron Suite, is back out as a physical release. Sierra Hull's Holiday Favourites, 2 songs also available as 7-inch vinyl. The High Horse album, Alison Brown, Steve Martin and Vince Gill's Wall Guitar, Scroggins and Rose's Pandemic Buddy, and the Caitlin Canty EP Come By The Highway Home. Lots and lots of good music in there. As always, the Stuff in the Grass is Mostly New 2024 playlist, which is on Spotify, soon to be replaced by the Grass is Mostly New 2025 playlist. But I'll keep it. We'll leave it all in there so you can go back and check out stuff. I'll just keep making one for each year because otherwise they just get epically long. But yeah, loads of good music there. Loads and loads of good music there. Let's move on to Scroll On Buddy. And this week's Scroll On Buddy, I noticed that Tony Rice's Manzanita is being reissued on vinyl. Church Street Blues was fairly recently, and Manzanita is now coming out, which is a collaboration between the Heady Wax Fiends Record Club and Real Gone Music, latest in their audiophile vinyl reissue series. It is based on the 1987 digital remaster. Lacquers were cut at Well Made Music, and pressing was handled by Gotta Groove Records, and it's coming out on December the 15th, just in time for Christmas. It's going to be way too big to fit in a stocking, but your average Tony Rice fan will be delighted with a copy of that, I'm sure. And there's a special rounder bundle put together, which includes, for the price of $68, 1 copy each of Tony Rice Unit's Manzanita and 2 other proper classics of the genre, Bellaflex Drive and JD Crowe and the New South's The New South. I'll stick a link in the show notes to where you can go and buy that. That sounds like a very cool bundle indeed. That's about it for this week. So what else? In my ears this week, I always have a little bit of chat about what I'm listening to. And there's a couple of bits. One thing I'm reading, which is Perfecting Sound Forever, which I talked about before. I'm still wading through that. I'm trying to take my time and really sort of dig into it. But what I'm listening to now is lots of clawhammer banjo. I just put a little thing on Instagram saying, what should I listen to? And Ken White from IBMA recommended an album by Adam Hurt called Earth Tones, which is astonishing. It's sort of gourd banjo instrumentals with a lovely sort of haunting atmospheric quality to them. It's just such a beautiful record. It's got space and intimacy and I'd never heard it and I really, really love it. So thanks, Ken. And if you don't know it, go and have a listen. I'll stick a link in the show notes or I'll put a track in the playlist or something like that. That is the end of the briefing for this week. One final thing. If you would care to, you can subscribe to Bluegrass Jam Along, which gives you all these episodes without the ads, the interviews uninterrupted, you get straight to the content, all of that stuff. But it also lets you support Bluegrass Jam Along. It takes a lot of time to put this together. I love it, but all the little bits of revenue that I get very much help. It's only $2.99 a month if you want to subscribe, so have a look on Apple. If you do, I would very much appreciate it. If not, share an episode with a friend or just get in touch and tell me something. I'd love to hear your thoughts, which episodes you've enjoyed, what you'd like to hear more of, if there's anybody you'd like to hear on the podcast. Yeah, just get in touch and let me know. But that's it for this week. Have a fantastic week. I'm back on Wednesday with the Dan Gutstein episode all about Little Liza Jane and that wonderful book I was talking about. I will see you next time. Have a great week and happy picking.
Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.